How many times in your life have you been asked the question by doctors, perhaps alternative health practitioners, friends, family members, are you getting enough protein in your diet? Now, if you're someone that's been following a vegan diet or vegetarian diet, plant-based diet, or you're someone of small stature, you don't have that much muscle mass, you've probably been asked this question so many times that you probably even lost count how many times you've been asked this question. And often this can lead to some sort of doubt within your mind where you start to ask yourself, maybe I'm not healthy because I'm not getting enough protein. And it starts to sabotage your mind, and you then start to fall victim to this conventional wisdom. I need to get enough protein in my diet. In today's video, I want to share with you my perspective, what I think is a protein myth. Now, I've fallen victim to this conventional wisdom, and I walked this path of trying to augment my diet with a number of these protein sources, from going to the route of consuming these protein powders that are touted with so many health benefits that are so expensive and can take such a huge chunk of money out of your pocket, to consuming more natural sources like lentils, beans, the greens, and even consuming things like soy products. I tried so many different variations to try and get to that recommended amount of protein that we should be consuming in order to try and improve my health, try and gain more weight to achieve that what is considered normal body weight and normal muscle mass. As always, please remember, none of what I share is considered medical advice. I'm sharing with you my perspective and the experience that I've gone through and why today I consider this a protein myth. Now, it may not be the same for everyone, and I may learn later down the line that I was wrong, but I'm merely sharing with you the perspective based on the knowledge that I have right now and the experience that I've gone through trying to navigate this protein recommended consumption per day. Now, in order to put this into perspective, I want to share with you some of the stats that I found in terms of what is the recommended amount of protein that we should be consuming. Now, I pulled up two of the mainstream sources. The one is the British Heart Foundation, which recommends 0.75 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, which for an average person is in the 40 to 50 gram range of protein that you should be consuming a day. Now, if you consume meat, you're generally going to get to that level quite easily. If you're someone that's following a vegan diet and a very restrictive type of diet, and you're not consuming that much of lentils and beans, then it can be fairly challenging to try and get to that level. If you're someone that follows the intermittent fasting regimen and you're following a vegan diet, it can also be quite challenging getting to that amount of protein, and you may end up supplementing with protein powders to try and achieve that recommended amount of protein. The other source that I pulled up was the Mayo Clinic, and they're recommending about 0.8 grams per kilogram of weight, which is not too far, which is in that ballpark region. In terms of also understanding this protein market, it's also important to look at the market for protein powders, because I think this really helped me understand why there is this mainstream narrative out there that recommends such a huge amount of protein that we should be consuming. And so I just pulled up some stats from Google. I didn't do any audits on these numbers. I didn't really dive deep to verify all these numbers. I looked at a website that's called Global Market Insights. And according to that website, they said the protein powder market roughly represents around 21.4 billion US dollars in 2023. So that's a lot of money, and which is somewhat reasonable given how expensive a lot of these protein powders are. Now, if you've ever walked in the shop aisles, then you'll notice that these protein powders, they are really expensive products, and it's not like you're getting a huge amount. It's just like a tub of protein that you can go through fairly quickly. You can understand that this is a fairly large market and why it would be in their interest to try and get people to consume as much protein as possible. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if they had some influence in terms of the recommended amount of protein that we should be consuming. It would be of absolutely no surprise to me if they were funding those studies or they had some influence in trying to increase that number to ensure that their interests are being served. Now, the other thing to consider when it comes to a lot of these protein powders is to look at the ingredients and really consider the ingredients, because initially when I started consuming these products and I was recommended to consume these products, to throw them in my smoothies, add them to my foods to ensure that I'm getting enough protein. And I started to look into these ingredients, and when you do so, you start to understand that a lot of this is just flours. Now, can you imagine just going to a bulk store and picking up a flour? Say you're buying chickpea flour, because a lot of this is pea protein flours, right? And you're just taking that flour, mixing it with water and consuming it. It will taste pretty terrible. Leave alone that a lot of it wouldn't have been soaked. It wouldn't have been sprouted. So you're just having those powders mixed with water, and it would taste really terrible. So they often have to add a lot of filler ingredients to make it more palatable. Sugars, natural flavors, all sorts of flavorants, sugars to try and make it taste more palatable. And we as a public generally fall victim to a lot of this, and we run out there and we get these protein powders thinking, no, we've got to have it, add them to our smoothies, mask the taste of it to ensure that we're getting the recommended amount of protein. So as I mentioned, for a long time I followed this conventional wisdom, and I wasn't doing too well from a health perspective at that time. And because I was consuming a lot of these protein powders, I found that it was very hard on my digestive system. And it often led me to feeling worse because I struggled to digest it. And I'd move from one protein powder and I started moving to these fermented protein powders. Those were slightly better on the digestive system, but they weren't really beneficial to my health. And then I started to look at the ingredients, and I noticed that some of them even add a lot of stimulants in there. So they'll add things like caffeine or something to stimulate your energy levels, to give you that false assumption that you're getting a lot of energy from consuming these products. Meanwhile, you're only stimulating your body. And that's why a lot of people that end up leaving these products tend to feel that low in energy. You tend to feel like your energy and vitality has been sapped out, and you say, no, but I have to have this product because that helps me sustain my energy levels, not realizing that we're actually taking more and more stimulants to just mask symptoms and not really do anything to solve the problem. So as I mentioned, for a long time I followed that conventional wisdom, and slowly I started to realize that these products weren't really helping me from a health perspective. And then I started to transition to more natural alternatives, trying to still follow the recommended guidelines, trying to get it from sources like lentils, beans, legumes, soy products. And funny enough, when I done that, I felt slightly better, but still too, even though I was consuming those foods and trying to increase the amount that I should be getting, it was having a quite a detrimental effect on my digestion, because a number of these proteins, they're very, very hard to digest. And that too, I don't even think we should be consuming that much of lentils and legumes in order to get sufficient protein. And what was really important here was trying to then let go of these conventional beliefs and start to walk my own path, because none of that was really helping me from a digestion perspective. My digestion was still weak, and I was still encountering a lot of reflux symptoms from consuming these types of foods. And finally, I let go of all that, and I started to just listen to my body and reduce the amount of protein. And because I was also following an intermittent fasting regimen, I wasn't consuming that many meals. And for someone who has a very weak digestion, to be constantly consuming foods in order to get to recommended daily amounts of protein, it's really challenging to get there. So what I noticed is, if we let go of that, then I can listen to my body and give my body the nutrition that it needs when it needs it, rather than just consuming to get to certain levels, to try and turn everything into a mathematical equation and make sure that I'm getting the right numbers. And rather just tune into the body and listen to the body when the body feels satiated, and try and make sure I'm getting good, high quality food products, like organic products, things which don't have that much pesticide, and just trying to have foods that don't have that much of an adverse effect in terms of acid reflux symptoms or poor digestion, bloating, and so forth. So that was really important in terms of a realization, to understand that there's really no need to have that much of protein. So for a number of years, I followed a diet which would in the mainstream be considered a protein deficient diet. And I've actually felt better following a low protein diet than a very high protein diet, because it seems to be easier on the digestive system and it's much more tolerable. And that's what led me down that path of really starting to question this narrative or the mainstream wisdom which says that you must get a certain amount of protein, and who's really influencing that. And that also led me to the other school of thought, which, when you look at people who are following a fruitarian diet, who are following a raw vegan diet, and who aren't consuming legumes, beans, and they generally tend to eat very clean meals. And I started to question, well, how are they getting protein? Because a lot of fruits and raw foods don't have that much of protein. And if they are sustaining themselves on a fruitarian diet for so many years, then clearly there's some myth in the mainstream narrative that says that you should have so much of protein per day. And a number of these proponents of fruitarian diet will often refer you to think about a chimpanzee that follows a fruitarian diet. Chimpanzee is really strong and muscular built, and they're not getting a lot of protein in their diet. Look at some of the animals like cattle that are consuming grass. There's not a lot of protein there either. And this starts to really bring about revelations within the mind to say, wait a minute, maybe we've been lied to. Maybe we don't need that much protein, because if you look to nature and you can just observe these animals that are following fruitarian diets, that are not consuming that much protein, that are so like bulky, muscular animals, and yet they're doing it without consuming that much protein, then somewhere along the line we are being manipulated to have a wrong belief about the amount of protein that we should be consuming. And that's what I hope to share in this video, to just give you a new perspective on how much protein we should be consuming and who's really profit-taking from this narrative. Because we may be getting enough protein from these natural food sources that we're consuming, and we don't need to meet this arbitrary number that they're putting out there to say that you need to consume that much of protein. And we can potentially sustain our lives quite well if we're eating more natural whole foods, rather than consuming all these synthetic foods that are costing us so much of money and are just literally robbing us of our health and our money at the same time. And if you're someone that's fallen victim to it, don't feel bad about it, because I was in that same boat. I'd fallen victim to it for so many years. just doing all the wrong things, like going out there and just following that conventional wisdom and still having poor health. So thanks so much for watching. If any of this content resonates with you, please do like, share, and subscribe. And please leave your comments in the comment section below if you've encountered something similar or you navigating this part currently. With that, I'll see you in my next video.